Lawrence Jones, it's going to be 12 o'clock, a one-on-one, a 1 o'clock, a one-on-7. We don't know how it's going to be. And then there's going to be a press conference today. Can you imagine these world leaders all taking all these questions Trump style?
I think I like it. I like the transparency. What I've learned, I guess when you encompass Trump term 1, is to take a beat. A part of the reason why there's so much criticism right now in talking is because we don't know what happened in the meeting. And so a lot of people are speculating right now. One thing I know for sure is that the president wants peace. The question is at what cost? Does Putin really mean what he says he means when he says there are going to be security guarantees? Let's see what happens, Brian.
Yeah, I will say that Europeans going to come in. They want to know the details, but they could be doing more. And Senator Lindsey Graham brought that up yesterday, cut 12.
To Europe, why don't you put tariffs on India for buying Russian oil? To Europe, why don't you threaten China with tariffs for being the largest purchaser of Russian oil? To Europe, you can do more. If Europe and the United States banded together and we told Russia that if this war does not come to an end, we're going to destroy your fossil fuel economy, this war would come to an end.
So, yeah, I never thought about that. Why is Europe not putting tariffs on?
And to that point, Brian, we had Dan Hoffman on earlier in the program, and I sent him a message. He said I could communicate this message. And I asked him, I said, what are we missing when it comes to this negotiation? He said this. He goes, we didn't get quite to it, but one thing I would expect being in the pasture at the CIA is that the president would ask the director of the CIA, Ratcliffe, to brief him on Putin's plans and intentions and pain points. The question is how can we bring Putin to where we want him to be? And what we need to do. Intelligence can help inform that, but ultimately it has to be a policy decision from the president.
Right. Ratcliffe was there, so I'm sure he was able to point out some inconsistencies. When it comes down to the actual swapping of land, what do we know? We know what Russia concedes, Kharkiv and Sumy perhaps, where Russia gets Donetsk and Luhansk. They freeze the lines and maybe deal with Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. Zaporizhzhia is key for the Ukrainians because they want their nuclear power plant back, which, by the way, all of this stuff is frozen. They steal the land, but right now the best we could do is try to swap to get some of it back. But they actually want the no-go zone for me is what they've done and what they're requesting with the Fortress Belt. The Fortress Belt is made up of 4 large cities, several towns and settlements. They run north to south. They had a pre-war population of 380,000. The belt is about 50 kilometers long, 31 miles, about the distance between Washington and Baltimore. And it contains coal, it contains iron, it contains a ton of rare earth. It's a lot of money, natural gas. It's a lot of money, but more importantly, it's a block of Kharkiv and Kyiv. If you give up that area, it's one highway through farmland right to the capital.
The question is, when it comes to Donbass, Brian, do you think it is okay? And this is Ukraine. We can all speculate. Do you think it's fair to say if we give them the security guarantees, we give them Article 5 without giving them admittance into NATO, that's fair to give that away? Because what the Ukrainians would say is it's not just the land. This is just a strategic posture for our military. Right. But if we're giving them air support and boots on the ground, is that okay?
Well, as Dan Hoffman brought up, keep in mind it's expensive.
Right.
And then do you want international troops on your land when you're just trying to grow your town, your city? Well, the answer would be yeah, if it provides security, because we know that in a few years they're going to make up some story about Russian-speaking people who want their freedom and are oppressed by the democracy that's burgeoning underneath them, which is folly in even their statements. I just hope the Russians understand that nobody buys their ridiculous take on history. It's also brought up to me, too, is that, yeah, we were on the same side as the Soviets in World War II that Vladimir Putin keeps bringing up. But you know the only reason we're on the same side is because Hitler double-crossed them. But they were in bed with Hitler. Right. So this is the same attitude. I'm not saying, I'm always hoping the next person coming in is Gorbachev or a drunk Yeltsin. But this guy has... Clinton tried to work with him, thought he could. Bush tried to work with him, was sure he could. Obama says, I'm going to reset. Sorry about those other guys. And then Biden, ridiculous, one meeting and one terrible. And then back to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump says, yeah, I could deal with this guy. We're going to find out, because my hope is that Trump listens to a lot of what the Europeans saying, and that is, yeah, we know you're not going to get the 18% back that you lost in the war. But swapping land that they can't capture, I think is a no-go zone.
I just think, Brian, if we don't deal with this problem now, okay, we set it back for a year. Yeah, more people died. The second thing is, the president is actually one of the few that I trust with dealing with this conflict. Because to your point, Brian, what's going to happen if they don't reach some type of agreement or they don't get the security guarantees this time around? When another president is in, this is the apple of Putin's eye. This is ideology. It's almost equivalent to the radical Islamists, right? You sign a treaty with them saying they won't attack, they won't build nuclear weapons, and they just wait it out because this is their heart. This is what they want.
Yeah, I want you to hear. Here's Senator Chris Murphy. These are the people that always have something negative to say. Cut 19.
That meeting was a disaster. It was an embarrassment for the United States. It was a failure. Putin got everything he wanted. I mean, first of all, he wanted that photo op, right? He wanted to be absolved of his war crimes in front of the world. He was invited to the United States. War criminals are not normally invited to the United States of America. He is intentionally murdering civilians. He's kidnapping children. And now he got to stand next to the president of the United States, legitimized in the view of the world. Trump said, if I don't get a ceasefire, Putin's going to pay a price. And then he walked out of that meeting saying, I didn't get a ceasefire, I didn't get a peace deal, and I'm not even considering sanctions. Putin walks away with his photo op with zero commitments made and zero consequences. What a great day for Russia.
That's not true. First of all, you don't know what happened in the meeting because you weren't president. And the leaks from the administration on what took place in the meeting has been very few. Number two, the president didn't say that he wouldn't put sanctions on Putin. He's trying to get peace a go. And if it doesn't work out in the next week or so, you can very well see maximum pressure against Russia. So the idea, Marco Rubio made this point on the Sunday shows, and I think it was in a very astute point. People keep saying that the president is legitimizing Putin. It's a world superpower. It's like it's the world's second largest nuclear power. So it's like you guys are making a point that he took a meeting with the guy when he's been talking with him by phone for months now. Yeah. Is asinine to the debate.
Here's what General Jack Keane said, cut 20.
People walk away and say, well, there's nothing there. Nothing happened but a red carpet and a flyover. Well, that's nonsense. A lot of things have happened here. And the reality is there's a potential trilateral meeting, including President Zelenskyy. I think the president's going to assess that based on what is happening here in Washington, D.C. And this includes the Secretary General, all the top leaders of the European countries are here. And obviously President Zelenskyy is here with his team. And what are they all working on? They're all working on peace with President Trump. That in itself is a huge step forward.
So we'll see what happens when we get more details. We'll see what happens, because I think it's better. I mean, Zelenskyy just can't. I know the president would want Zelenskyy just to sign off on all that. Number one, I don't believe that anything the Russians do, unless you have to be able to verify it and in real time, and there's got to be a block against them changing their mind. But let's say the Russians say, here's your Rule 5. Here, I'm going to exchange some territory. I want the rest of the Donbass region. I don't think that Zelenskyy signs off on it, but he should have a counterproposal. Don't just say no. Just have a counterproposal on what's possible. And you have to know, too, that he does not speak as a king. He speaks as somebody elected with a parliament. Right. And that parliament's got to approve it. So Zelenskyy could go recommend it, but he's got 56% approval rating. That's hardly something that's going to intimidate the parliament to vote with him.
Right. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to the approval of this process. The last thing I would say is this. The Democrats you don't help the process when you try the same thing you did back in 2016, saying that the president is friends with Putin. Okay, you guys did that, and now we're finding revelations of how you planted all of this, and it wasn't real. It wasn't real, and it derailed his old administration the first term. Mm-hmm. So don't start this stuff back and forth that he's working with Putin and they're buddies, and he likes the dictator because he wants to be a dictator. It's not helpful to the process.
I hear you.
What's really striking here is how badly played this is for the Democrats. Of all of the places for these fugitive legislators to go, Illinois should have been the last on the list. It is the most gerrymandered state in the union. And most of us were just dumbfounded that they would go to Illinois, which is my home state. And Illinois, New York, California, those are all heavily gerrymandered.
So Jonathan Turley weighing in with Mark Levin last night, and what he's doing is saying that for these Texas lawmakers to leave Texas and hide out in Illinois was dumb because it highlights how bad this has been gerrymandered, and Texas is totally constitutionally allowed to do what they're doing. Lawrence Jones still with me. Lawrence, you want to weigh in?
Well, they better be careful because there's a bill already on the floor. There were two maps essentially in Texas, and they could have got the 4 to 5. Jeff Leach, who is one of the chairmen of the Criminal Justice Committee, is saying, you know what? Why don't we do the 9 to 10 map then? If they want to play this
9 to 10
game,
districts would flip.
100%. That could flip. So you guys better be careful on how you play this game because it's not going to. The population of Texas is growing. Not the same for California. Not the same for New York. So, and by the way, Brian, I made this point on our show this morning. The Latino vote was trending right. So this is going to give the Latino community more seats, which is based on the last election.
Right. So the 4 of the 5 districts that are now on the table to be redistricted when the Democrats come back in and allow this thing to have a quorum are Hispanic, majority
Yes.
Hispanic seats. So Kevin Kiley's in California. He's one of the few Republican lawmakers there, and this could affect him directly. Here's cut 25.
The good news is a poll just a couple days ago came out showing that voters are standing by their decision. They're saying, thanks for asking. We want to keep the independent commission. We don't want to give this power back to politicians. The bad news is that Newsom has already come up with a plan to defraud the people of California by making the yes option on the ballot look like no, and by making no look like yes. And they're going to spend over $100 million to perpetrate that fraud on our electorate. So we are going to need to fight against this in every way that we can.
And Schwarzenegger coming out is really interesting because he's got power in the state. I know he left with about 43% approval rating, but his popularity has since gone up. People look at his gubernatorial years as much better than Newsom's. And he came out and said, I'm against gerrymandering.
Yeah. All I would say to the people of California, remember how your leaders handled the prop system. You remember the last prop that they put on the ballot to make it where if people stole less than $1,000 that the cops weren't going to show up? How did that do for your state? Many businesses left, crime went up. So don't try to cheat the system. Do it the right way. Have the debate there and just take the win. You guys gerrymandered. The other side did it as well. Let bygones be bygones.
So we'll see what happens because we know it's going to be 4 or 5 seats will decide the power in the administration. The other thing to keep in mind, too, is that Newsom is using this just to launch his presidential campaign. It's a risk in this. If the referendum doesn't pass, he loses.
Yes.
So
he loses, and he also has to take in consideration his popularity as well as the Democratic Party popularity is not so good right now.
He's got 38% approval rating.
So, I mean, you want to go with it?
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Here's more from Kevin Kiley, cut 26.
What's happening in California is a lot different because voters have already established an independent citizens commission. And they've said politicians are not allowed to draw their own district lines. That is an inherent conflict of interest. And so Gavin Newsom is seeking to upend the Constitution and to override the will of voters. And by the way, if he does this, California, the goal is to reduce California's congressional delegation from 9 out of 52 Republicans to 4 out of 52 Republicans. So we would be in worse position, or we're in worse position now than even the Democrats would be in Texas if that plan goes through.
So you do that, and then Texas redrives the line from 9 to 10, and you still lose. Meanwhile, you already have lost 2 congressional seats in California. So,
yeah, I think Indiana's making moves now, and I think Florida will be next. But first, let's get to the big 3.
Number 3.
All of this is a total abuse of power. It's a manufactured emergency.
What's happening here in Washington, D.C. is just a stunt. He just decided to create a new news cycle.
Plain and simple. Donald Trump wants to distract.
Distract? Are you crazy? Distract what? By doing the Russian situation, the passing the big, beautiful bill? You think the Epstein story? This Epstein story is being investigated. William Barr just walked in. He's not looking to distract. He's looking to make history. And he's also looking to bring law and order back to the streets that was not there when he left the White House the first time.
Number 2.
We need to disabuse ourselves of the way things have been done. It's not good enough to just hold hands, have a candlelight vigil, and talk about the way the world should be. And we have got to meet fire with fire.
Gavin Newsom thinks he's the one to do it. Gerrymandering standoff. The Dems have come home to Texas, giving the Republicans a quorum to redistrict. California says they're going to put a referendum on the ballot that does the same exact thing. They want to squeeze out about 5 more seats. I don't think it's going to pass, and I don't think it's possible.
Number 1.
Today is the big meeting. This really eclipses anything that happened on Friday. To have world leaders from Europe on a couple of days' notice descend on Washington really underscores how important this meeting is today. This has amazing impact on the international world order that's been in place since World War II and the Cold War.
And that's a Democrat from Massachusetts. European leaders, including Zelenskyy, are in town, and they dig in on what really came out of the Alaska summit, what we can count on Russia to do. If anything, we go over the decisions made. Gregory Slayton joins us now. Gregory, what do you? Thanks so much for joining us today. I know the Ukrainian people don't seem too thrilled by the optics of Alaska. Should they feel hopeful that there could be an end in sight?
Well, I think so, Brian. It's good to see you again. Always good to be on your show. I think so. I think it's great that President Trump is seeking peace. I think he has to remember the Ronald Reagan dictum, peace through strength. There is no appeasing Vladimir Putin. He'll take whatever we give him, and he'll take some more. So I'm thrilled that the President Trump, has invited these 7 European leaders, Zelenskyy. I'm really hoping and praying for an outstanding meeting today where we, as the Western democracies, can really stand together against the guy who has promised many, many times. He's signed lots of agreements. Russia has signed everything from the Budapest Memorandum in 1994 and many others, and has broken every single one of those treaties. So we just have to be careful, trust but verify, as the Kipper always said.
Mintz 1 and 2, he also violated that. So they did a poll inside Ukraine. 69% wanted a negotiated settlement to end the war. In the beginning of the war, only 22%. I don't blame them. I mean, what they've been forced to deal with, we have given them enough arms not to lose, but also not to win. So they've been putting up with now this drones, the North Korean troops. It's unbelievable what they've already done. But they are getting war weary. But how this war ends has a lot to do with how they feel about it.
No, Brian, you're exactly right. People are tired. I was just in Kyiv, and people are tired. Everybody's lost a friend or a family member, or their house or village, or everybody's lost something. And of course, people want peace. But no one, and I guarantee you, no one I spoke to wants to roll over and play dead for the Russian bear. No one. So yes, a fair peace, a peace with some reasonable security guarantees. Right. Everyone is in favor of that. Remember when President Trump offered both sides a ceasefire, Zelenskyy said right away, yes, a ceasefire is a good idea. Putin has continued to move the goalposts. I'm not ready. We have to deal with historical conditions. And when you dig into what he's really saying, he was saying he wants Ukraine to surrender. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, according to people in the room, the Russians feel like they got momentum on the battlefield, said they don't want a ceasefire. They want a peace deal, if anything. But this is the part of Vladimir Putin, and there's a lot I hate, but especially this ridiculous statement that I hope he doesn't think we're buying. Cut 3.
At the same time, we're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict. And we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole.
So he's worried about the root causes of the war. He is the cause of the war. Ukraine was never a threat to him. It was not a puppet for him, and that's the root cause.
Thank you, Brian. Ukraine has been an independent, sovereign nation, democracy. Of course, like all democracies, there are problems. That's true. That's probably true in our nation, too. But for over 35 years, and when you poll the Ukrainian people, nobody, and I mean, it's 80+% want to remain independent of Russia. And it's actually higher than that. It's more like 90%. But the point is, Putin doesn't like the way it is now. He's been very clear about his desire to reestablish greater Russia. That's not just Ukraine. That's Poland. That's Moldova. That's Georgia. That's a whole lot of other countries that right now are independent. It's like Hitler in the 30s. If we don't stop Putin now, he's not going to stop himself. He's not.
Do you think he learned a harsh lesson in this conflict, despite what he says? I mean, that he lost 20,000 soldiers over the last 5 months. 20,000 soldiers. He's lost over 1 million casualties. Yeah. Hundreds of thousands of dead. The money, the isolation. I mean, this has been an embarrassment for him. NATO's never been stronger, more motivated. 2 more quality countries now join the alliance. Correct. He lost Syria. And that means access to the Middle East. They lost a port in the Middle East. My goodness.
Yeah. No, Brian, you are 100% right. My sources in Kyiv tell me that the Russians are losing on average 1,000 men a day, killed or wounded. Not just killed, but killed or severely wounded. I mean, that's a tremendous strain. You're right, over 1 million men killed and wounded. The Russian economy, their National Reserve Fund has gone from 3.7 down to basically nothing. So we're talking about an absolute disaster economically. Inflation rate is up in the high teens. I mean, Vladimir Putin rused the day he started this war, but that's why he's not going to give up. He's not going to give up until we force him to give up.
So if, as Marco Rubio brought up, say, look, if we hit them with sanctions, we can do that. We might end up doing that. But the talks end for a year. So we maximize the sanctions. We get the third-party sanctions on China, on Turkey, on Brazil, on India that's already there. Okay. Right. Maybe we take their $300 billion, which I hope we have done before, and just give it to Ukraine. Okay. But just keep in mind, the flip side of that is the war continues for another 2 years. And that is what Trump didn't want to do as a mediator. Yes. So why play that card? Politically, they say, why did Trump not hit him with sanctions? Because he's thinking, what gets me to the outcome I want? I might end up there, but if I do that, I've already, the die has been cast.
Well, I appreciate that, Brian. You're absolutely right. First thing, and President Trump is 100% right, stop the killing on both sides. Let's talk for a moment about the thousands of Ukrainian civilians that are killed and wounded every single month by Russian drones and first-person, aerial vehicles. So you're absolutely right. My fear is that Putin will take everything we give him and will continue to attack and attack. Remember that July was by far the most civilian casualties in Ukraine of the entire war. Every single month this year, Putin has sent more and more drones and missiles after hospitals, churches, schools. I mean, it is horrible. So President Trump knows what he's doing. He's a great negotiator, but I do think that bringing sanctions into play would force Putin much more quickly. Their economy, I just did a big article in the New York Post on this. Their economy, the Russian economy, is in dire, dire straits. They're trying to paper it over, but the cracks are showing. Entire industries, the coal industry, the hospitality industry, the aviation industry are going bankrupt. So Russia doesn't have a year. If we hit them with sanctions, I think that'll bring Vladimir Putin to the table much more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens because I just think that it's a non-starter when you want Ukraine to swap land that Russia can't win in battle. And
Correct.
And that they can't do that. I mean, they've already taken illegally 20% of the country, and now a part that they can't win that they fortified. It's called the Fortress Belt, made up of 4 large cities. So come on, you can't do that. But I understand, get in there. So Article 5 consideration, I get it. So you want to go back and forth, and they say, well, we'll give you Zaporizhzhia, we'll give you a nuclear power plant back, we'll give you Sumy. All right. I know we're dealing with Ukrainian land, and in a fair, free world, that we wouldn't be dealing like this. But in the real world, we got to get down to rolling up your sleeves and getting to the bottom here, unless Ukraine feels as though it's to their benefit to grind it out more. Like you said, the economy could go over the edge.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because Donetsk, the Ukrainians for 10 years have been building a huge defensive fortifications right there. Russia has not been able to penetrate it in 3.5 years of full-scale warfare, right? So why would America, why would we agree to give away a huge chunk of the United States for nothing, right? It doesn't make any sense. This is Ukrainian land that is very well defended. As I said, Russia, this would be the single biggest victory. What they're asking for, if we agree to it and Ukraine agrees to it, would be by far the largest battlefield victory in the war for Russia. Why would Ukraine do that? It makes no sense.
All right. The president says, I'm going to continue to sell our weapon systems to NATO. NATO's buying them, and they're going to put them in. And he's going to make that clear. He kind of made that clear to us already. So even if he gets mad at Zelenskyy again today, the weapons are still going to go.
Absolutely.
Because NATO's buying them, and I like the idea, and it quiets down the Republicans and all the people on the far right who says we're wasting too much money in foreign wars.
Well, you've probably seen, Brian, the polls are really shifting. I mean, the majority of Republicans say we should support Ukraine as an independent. Yeah, exactly. And the number that say we should not support Ukraine has shrunk dramatically. So I'm glad the American people are looking at this honestly. We've done a lot of work on this. I do a lot of op-eds in the New York Post and National Review and stuff. This book, which we published early in the spring, we give 100% of the proceeds, 100% of the profits to really good Ukrainian charities. And of course, it's not just us, you and Fox. There's been a lot of good work on this. And I'm very thankful that the American people are saying, no, this is a Democratic ally that has borne the brunt themselves. I mean, Ukraine's lost over at least 300, 400,000 men killed and wounded. And of course, it's a much smaller country than Russia. So they have borne the brunt of this battle, and we need to be with them.
Yeah, it's 150 million against, I think, 46 million.
Even less.
Is it? Okay. Portraits of Ukraine, a Nation at War. Greg Slayton, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Pick up the book. It goes for a great cause.
Thank you, Brian. Always good to see you. And Brian, I remember one last thing. When President Trump was with you back in March or something, he specifically talked about you asked him, and he said about the 20,000 Ukrainian children who've been kidnapped. That's important. I was so proud of our First Lady that she wrote that letter to Putin and said, Mr. Putin, time to give back these kidnapped kids. We cannot forget about that. Imagine if we were in war with anybody and 20,000 American kids were kidnapped, and now they're being, reprogrammed into Russian families as quote, quote, orphans, which of course they're not at all. So it's another horrific war crime.
They're put into binders and put in adoption books, and people show up. And bottom line, people say, how'd they get them? Not just orphanages, boarding schools. They were just in boarding schools. Can you imagine some great schools or boarding schools? So don't act like the Ukrainians had dispatched their kids somewhere else.
No,
these kids had families.
Not at all.
Thanks so much.
And some of those kids were taken right off the battlefield. Russians come in, everybody's scrambling. Somehow the kids get separated. They end up in Russian hands. Instead of returning them, they take them back to Mother Russia and try and reprogram their minds. It's sick. Another horrible war crime.
Unbelievable. Gregory Slayton, thanks so much.
We need to disabuse ourselves of the way things have been done. It's not good enough to just hold hands, have a candlelight vigil, and talk about the way the world should be. We have got to recognize the cards that have been dealt. And we have got to meet fire with fire.
That is Gavin Newsom, who thinks he can make some headway. He clearly is running for president and wants to be the foil against Trump, and that's the best way to do it. He's also posting up Truth Social, Twitter X posts that shows he's trying to do in the Trump language. Is that going to work? Haven't we tried this before? Mark Penn, CEO and chairman of Stagwell, does the Harris polls, joins us now. Mark, is this going to be an effective move for Newsom to put himself as the counter to Texas and Trump?
Well, look, Newsom fundamentally has an uphill battle to be a credible presidential candidate based on his record in California, based on what happened with the fire and fire management. So obviously he doesn't want to talk about California and his record. He wants to talk about Trump. And he's going to fight for the Democratic Party. I suppose it's a better strategy than talking about his record because he doesn't really have much to talk about.
He hasn't really been strong on his record, but he wants to get publicity, and he certainly looks the part. To me, he just comes off as an actor. He's got 38% approval rating. What about Arnold Schwarzenegger? And I know this is drilling down and kind of, the last Republican governor. He came out and said, for gerrymandering, I'm going to fight you. And now he's got to put something on a ballot to reverse the rule that an independent council decides what districts are districts in California. He wants to remove it for 1 year. That referendum right now is underwater, right?
Yes. I think 70% of Californians oppose it because Californians, and people in every state, by the way, want themselves to be represented in Congress based on who and what they are. So, so if he loses that, oh my God, then he's like made a complete fool of. So I don't know if he's really going to go down that path, but if he does, he better win.
Yeah, or else that could be critical. I mean, that could be fatal, couldn't it?
Yeah, because then he'll look like he has complete egg on his face, and he was going to fight. Only he had a pop gun, And so put all these threats out. In terms of it, look, the reality is that Obama and Holder gerrymandered the country on behalf of Democrats and for years. And you can see in all of these states, including California, that Republicans are generally underrepresented by like half. And, what Texas is doing, I'm not going to endorse it. But I am going to say in the scheme of the overall map between the gerrymandering in the big Democratic states and what happened with the census count, which to me was actually much more outrageous, which is that they issued a census and then 2 years later said, never mind, but everything had been redistricted already when they realized that the population had been misallocated. So, I don't know. And voters don't care about any of this stuff, to be honest.
Maybe Kevin Kiley, who's a Republican in California, says it looks like Gavin Newsom is up to something. Cut 25.
The good news is a poll just a couple days ago came out showing that voters are standing by their decision. They're saying, thanks for asking. We want to keep the independent commission. We don't want to give this power back to politicians. The bad news is that Newsom has already come up with a plan to defraud the people of California by making the yes option on the ballot look like no, and by making no look like yes. And they're going to spend over $100 million to perpetrate that fraud on our electorate. So we are going to need to fight against this in every way that we can.
So there might be a little bit of deception there.
I hope not. I mean, look, some of the courts, this has been tried before in California, and sometimes the courts actually step in and require that people be able to understand the text of the ballot and that yes is not no and no is not yes. So that's a fair point that's being made, but I'm sure that's going to undergo some kind of court scrutiny based on the litigious world that we live in.
I hope so. So the other thing I find surprising is President Obama, you mentioned him and Eric Holder, after they left office, went on a gerrymandering mission. I got it. They said they wanted to make it fairer. Obviously, they want to make it fairer for Democrats to their advantage. Now they're back in action, and it looks like Barack Obama is having a huge fundraiser with Nancy Pelosi, I believe, in Narragansett. Your thoughts about President Obama coming back again, but this time earlier? Does it surprise you?
I don't know if I'm surprised at this point. I mean, former president, it's very hard to be a young former president, as he was he and both Bill Clinton were young, two-term former presidents, but the general role for former presidents was to operate in the spirit of the amendment that limited you to 2 terms and get out of politics and do something else, which I don't know. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And both Pelosi and Obama, I suppose, are somewhat better than AOC and Mandami. So I'm not gonna criticize that compared to the alternatives here.
So, Mark, I understand if you could tell me I'm wrong, but I understand the president asked you to come to the White House and ask you some questions.
Well, I never comment on stuff like that. So you can ask away, but
could I ask you, have you ever been asked by a Republican president before?
Let's just say that I have. Look, I do, as you know, a lot of polling and a lot of independent polling these days, outside of campaigns, and I enjoy briefing different leaders of what's going on in the country, because the most important reason I went into polling was in many different countries so that leaders would always have a good understanding of what the people are thinking and how they're reacting to presidents. So anytime, let's say anytime I can do that, I'm always happy to do it.
And I guess you did it. Ken Martin, the DNC, head of the DNC, is struggling this summer. He says they are trailing in every metric the Republicans in fundraising, and they have less cash this summer than at any point in 5 years. Why?
Well, the Democratic Party has the lowest ratings it's had in like 40 or, really, I've been polling for close to 50 years, and it is the lowest ratings that I've seen the Democratic Party have. So it doesn't surprise me, that they're trailing in numbers. But the left has a lot of energy. They're raising a lot of money, and that's the unfortunate thing of the social media age, where the extremes, have more access to funding through social media than the mainstreams. Look, I don't really pay much attention to these early fundraising numbers. There are going to be some big campaigns here. There's big donors on both sides. The Democrats have not experienced any net shortage of money. In fact, they've had a huge, at the same time that they've been against, quote, dark money. They've been the biggest beneficiaries of dark money, and they've outspent the Republicans like 50%. So maybe it'll be a more even playing field, but I'm not really worried one way or the other by the financial numbers. I think the polling numbers are much more serious.
Right. And for the most part, you still believe, if I'm looking at your past interviews, that the price of goods are going to have a lot to do with it. You could tell that inflation's down, but when they go shopping, when they go to buy things, especially around Christmas, and we're still trying to make heads or tails of the tariffs. They have not had a huge impact on the economy, but they have brought in a lot of revenue. If I was to rank the most important things to the American people, where would inflation and the price of goods rank?
Well, look, inflation is overwhelmingly the number one issue. But what people really mean by inflation is, how is the economy going? Are my wages rising, faster or slower than prices? Most of the inflation happened during the Biden administration. Is inflation under control? Are my wages increasing? Is the economy good? Look, everybody knows during the first term that Trump had, a national consensus emerged that the economy was good. At this point, we're not at that stage. There's like another year. I think, Trump has put in is working with international trade agreements and tariffs to make it more expensive to buy something overseas and promote more domestic production. And that's his goal. And he's trying to achieve that goal through the use of these tariffs. And I always explain to people that we only import 10% of the economy. So the impact of the tariffs, although differential by industry, 10 or 15% tariff is like 1% of the economy. There was that pales in comparison to some of the inflation numbers. And I also think that the Fed is operating incorrectly because in reality, a price increase due to a taxation, which tariffs are taxes, money goes into the government, contracts the economy, and they should be lowering rates to accommodate that. But I think inflation is number one, but a general sense that the economy is growing, that innovation is happening. I think the president has a year to get that from today. If a year from now we're sitting here and saying, this economy is really pretty good, growth is higher, people are happier, then the Republicans are going to have a pretty strong midterm. And if they're saying the economy is worsened, that's going to be more of a problem. But that is the defining problem for the voters.
So I had an interview with Scott Brown, who wants to flip that seat in New Hampshire. He obviously got experienced the big upset and wins Ted Kennedy's seat, then lost the next two races, was ambassador to New Zealand, and now is coming back again. Well, he's going against his opponent, and the first thing he did is say, tell me about Zohran Mamdani. Where do you stand? And the guy would not answer. He would not just say, he's not my speed, I'm not a socialist, I am a capitalist. Even Kathy Hochul has said that as governor of New York. So Scott Brown is making headway. Listen, cut 36.
To think that you have somebody who's 38. An anti-Semite and wants to tax rich white neighborhoods to give out free stuff, and who's not attracted by free stuff? But the fact that it's failed in other parts of the country, this is the Democratic Party of today, the AOCs, the Bernie Sanders, the Elizabeth Warrens, and now Mamdani. And this is what they're going to have to run on nationally in 26. And don't be surprised if he wins, that he won't be coming here to New Hampshire in the first in the nation primary to try to export that type of socialist communist beliefs around the country, and I don't think it's going to work.
So he's going to push it, and that's going to be what they're running on. Is that why Hakeem Jeffries rumored to have said if he wins, we're not going to win the House?
Well, look, there's a problem here with the Democratic Party in the sense that there's a group of Democratic socialists. They're not Democrats. They have a complete different ideology. You can look up their website. It calls basically for the confiscation of private property, the destruction of Israel, the defunding of the police. It basically is way outside what mainstream Democrats would support, and yet the party has accepted them as Democrats and let them burrow in and maybe even control the party. And if that happens, then yes, Hakeem Jeffries, rumored to say that, but definitely, unless the Democratic Party fixes that problem, if they're taken over by the Democratic Socialists, they're not going to do well in national elections.
But they do have the heat, and they do get the crowds.
They get the crowds because, look, the extremes get the crowds. They get money. But this is not, if I ask people, are you socialists or not, there's still going to be 80% who are capitalists in this country. And if I ask people they're for Israel, Hamas, 80% are going to be, or 75 to 80% are going to be for Israel over Hamas. If I ask people if they want to defund the police or not, 70 to 80% will not want to defund the police. So a 20% movement here can get a lot of heat, can get a lot of traction, can win in New York City with 400,000 voters in low turnout primaries. But that's very different from winning on the national scene. Remember, Democrats in 72 and 84 were reduced to a single state. Republicans went through a lot of wilderness too, and parties, do wind up in the wilderness. And there is a path here for the Democratic Party to be in the wilderness for a long time, and that's called being taken over by the Democratic Socialists.
Thanks so much, Mark Penn. I appreciate it, and I will get to the bottom of how your visits to the White House went, just without your cooperation.
Thank you.
Go get him.